assuming that there is something specific that is attracting men. I think that what it is a call to responsibility, essentially. I think that people are, especially young men, are sick and tired of being fed a constant diet of, you're good enough, you should feel happy with who you are. An endless diet of rights and freedoms will give you a meaningful life. And that's on the sort of pat you on the back, even though you don't deserve it, side of reality. And then there's the lack of call to adventure, I would say, and the accusation that men face increasingly that their active presence in the world does nothing but contribute to tyranny and oppression, which I think is absolute. It's not only nonsense, it's pernicious and destructive nonsense of the worst kind. And so, I've been telling men instead, or suggesting to them, explaining it more than telling, that it's necessary for them to grow up and get their act together and to adopt some responsibility and to bear a burden and to speak truthfully and to take responsibility, because there's important things to do in the world, and that the world will be a lesser place if they don't allow what's within them to come forward. And I think that that's true. And so I think that that's a message that reasonable young men who are somewhat lost are desperate for. Well, if you're not going to be rewarded for your virtues and instead you're going to be punished for them, then what's your motivation to continue, especially when it takes a fair bit of effort to say truthful things and to shoulder responsibility? And if the consequence of that, so there's reason to avoid it to begin with, just as a consequence of the difficulty. But if the net effect of doing that is that you're accused before you even do anything wrong of being an upholder of rape culture and the patriarchal tyranny in the oppressive West, then why in the world would you want to contribute to that, especially if you start to believe it? Some of it's just a matter of accepting excuses and taking the easy way out. Some of it's a matter of becoming guilty enough to actually believe it, withdrawing from active engagement in the world. The people who are going after masculinity, let's say, as toxic, can't distinguish between tyrannical power and competence. In fact, for them, there is no distinction between those two things, which shows you just how addled they really are, because it's extraordinarily important to discriminate between competence and power. And the postmodern types, especially the neo-Marxists, think, oh, well, competence, that's just how you justify your claim to your position. It's really just power. You're just defining competence in a way that benefits you. But that's idiotic. So it doesn't really require much of an argument. It's certainly no one ever acts like that. If you have a car and it doesn't work, you take it to a competent mechanic. If your father's heart is failing, you take him to a competent surgeon. And you don't think, oh, well, that person is just there because of the Western patriarchy and the privilege of the oppressor. So it's nonsense. It's resentful, cowardly, ideologically possessed, pathological nonsense, and it's extremely dangerous. And so I've been saying that about as bluntly as I just said it. And I think that more and more people are realizing that it's gone far enough. I'm sure hoping they are.
Like, if you're naive and you move forward, it's like, well, what the hell do you know? There's no courage in naivety, because you don't know what there is to stop you. You don't know what dangers you might apprehend. But to be aware of what it is that your problem is, so to be alert existentially, let's say, or to be fully self-conscious, means that you're perfectly aware of your limitations and how you might be hurt. And then to make the decision to move forward into the unknown and the land of the stranger. Anyways, I would say that's one of the secrets to a good life. There's nothing simple or trivial at all about the idea of being called to move forthrightly forward into the strange and the unknown. And there's some real adventure that's associated with that, right? So that's an exciting thing, which is part of the reason why people travel. And then also to see yourself as the sort of creature that can do that, is willing to do that on a habitual basis, is also the right kind of tonic for, I hate this word, for your self-esteem. Because self-esteem has nothing to do with feeling good about yourself. As I already mentioned, there isn't necessarily a reason why a priori you should just feel good about yourself. But if you can view yourself acting in a courageous and forthright manner and encountering the world and trying to improve your lot, and taking risks, in a non-naive way, well, then you have something that you can comfort yourself with at night when you're wondering what the whole damn point of your futile and miserable life. And that's necessary, because it's often the case that you wake up at 4 in the morning, or at least sometimes the case that you wake up at 4 in the morning when things haven't been going that well, and wonder just what the hell the point is of your futile and miserable life. You have to have something real to set against that. It can't be just rationalizations about how, you're a valuable person among others, even though that's true. That's not good enough. You need something that's more realistic to set against that. And observing courage in yourself is definitely one of the things that can help you sleep soundly at night when things are destabilized a little bit around you.
Life is very difficult. There's one of the most ancient of religious ideas that emerges everywhere, I would say, is that life is essentially suffering. And what that means is that while people are fragile and vulnerable and mortal and prone to physical decay and mental illness and to a fair share of malevolence as well, we're fragile creatures. And that means that life is hard and painful and anxiety provoking. And you need something to set against that that's worthwhile. And that's your destiny in the world, say your positive destiny in the world. And if you don't have something positive to set against that, and your life is nothing but struggle and pain, and with the occasional foray into malevolence or victimization by malevolence, then all you do is suffer stupidly, and that makes you bitter and resentful. And then, that's just the beginning of your trouble, because bitter and resentful, that's just where you start the descent into hell. You go from bitter and resentful to vengeful and to cruel and way past that if you really want to pursue it. And people pursue that all the time. It's not like it doesn't happen. It's not like this is some abstract dream. Well, everyone knows life is hard. And it's not just hard, it can be unbearably hard. And it's worse than hard, because sometimes the hardship is inflicted upon you by yourself or by someone close to you, or sometimes by an enemy, but sometimes by a friend. You get betrayed, and it's not just that it's hard. You're also subject to evil. You're subject to malevolence, and that makes it even worse. And everyone knows this. And so you need something to set against that. You need a noble way of being to set against that. And the thing is, all of everything I've said so far in this program, I would say in some sense is very dark and pessimistic, But what's optimistic is that having established the truth of the matter, the suffering of life and the malevolence that's part of it, you can also discover that living a meaningful life in the face of that, a responsible, meaningful, truthful life, is actually possible, and it actually works. That's the thing. That's the optimistic thing. It's not so bad to say to people, look, we've got a real problem here. It's no joke. It's a dead serious problem. It's the fragility of your life and hell all balled up into one thing. But that's okay, because there's an antidote to it. There's something you can do about it, and you can start today. I believe that the experience of meaning is an instinct, and you could think about it as the ordering instinct. It's more like the balancing instinct, but we'll start with ordering. There's a lot inside of you that needs to be ordered and set straight. Like you're a collection of motivations and emotions and thoughts and proto-actions and desires. Well, I suppose those are the same as motivations. You're a loose collection of all those things. And something has to bring all of that into a functioning order. And the experience of deep engagement, the experience of meaning, I think, is the manifestation of the instinct that orders you. And it orders you, and it orders your family, and it orders the world, the broader world as well. And that instinct isn't some secondary consequence of some more important biological function, let's say. It is that very function.
We move forward towards things that we value. So there's two propositions there. The first is that we have to move forward because there are things to move forward to, because there are things we need and want. And the second is that to move forward towards something is simultaneously to value it. And so one of the implications of that is that we always live in a framework of value. there's no escaping that, and that we're moved forward. I detailed this out quite substantially in my book, Maps of Meaning, but we're always at a place, and we're always moving towards a place that in principle has some advantage over the place we're at. Otherwise, why move towards it? And so what that means is that there's no life without value. At least there's no human life without value. Out of necessity, and also not only out of necessity at the physiological level, but also out of necessity at the psychological level, because another thing that you might point out that I think is usefully pointed out is that not only do you have to move from point A to B in life, but point A is often a very difficult place to be, because we're fragile and bounded and mortal and limited, and because we know that. And so one of the implications of that, as many great religious traditions are at pains to illustrate or demonstrate or proclaim, is that life is essentially suffering. And I believe that to be a fundamental truth. But perhaps not the most fundamental truth, because I think the most fundamental truth is that despite the fact that life is suffering, people can transcend that. And partly the way they transcend that is by pursuing things of value. And so that if there is no value proposition at hand, then you have no meaning to justify the difficult conditions of your life. And that's brutally difficult for people. You know, Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear any how. And you see, and I've certainly seen this as a clinical practitioner, that people who have no purpose in their life are embittered by the difficulties of their life. And they become first bitter, and then resentful, and then revengeful, and then cruel. And there's plenty of places to go past cruel. That's just where you start if you're really on a downhill path. All right, so those are the first propositions. The second proposition would be, well, if you're going to pursue something of value, because you're a social creature, you're going to pursue that thing of value in a social space, and that means you're going to compete and cooperate with people around you in the pursuit of that value. And what that inevitably means is that, given that the pursuit of anything valuable is going to be a collective enterprise, that you're going to produce a hierarchy, or maybe more than one hierarchy, but at least a hierarchy of competence in relationship to that pursuit. So it doesn't matter what you decide to pursue. Maybe you're going to do that cooperatively. You're going to find that you and other people vary in your ability to manage that pursuit effectively and efficiently.